Some new details now on that harrowing rescue of a base jumper from the side of a cliff on the Superstitions.
Tonight, the rescuers themselves revealing just how close they came to disaster. Faye Fredericks with the mission that left no room for error here. Faye?
Yeah, the slightest mistake could have killed everyone involved in this. The wind was blowing, the parachute was tearing. It was incredibly dangerous, but a risk rescuers felt they had to take when they heard what was happening hundreds of feet up the side of that mountain.
Being the one to go down there, I knew that we're going to have to deal and get the parachute off him at some point, and that was going to create a potential entanglement hazard. We were also concerned about the rotor wash and wind causing more damage.
The crew quickly realizing there was another problem.
The jumper was about 267 feet down. We have about 287 feet worth of cable. So if he was another 20 feet down, this could have been a whole other scenario.
Hey, Kathy from Tower Safety here with Tommy and Russ Dodge to talk about the mindset of a rescue. And our guest today is Russ. He's been with the search and rescue since 1985. He is one of my premier trainers and teaching climbing, rescue, and rigging. And we're lucky to have Russ here. So today we're going to talk again about the mindset of what it takes to rescue. Russ, you have been doing this since like 1985, and I've seen you on TV, I've seen your interviews, and now that we're lucky to have you here, because part of the tower industry is the guys, and you've seen, because you've been working with them now, the amount of time we have with them is just sometimes is not enough to get that whole mindset of getting prepared, ready to rescue.
That's correct. The mindset to properly conduct a rescue has to start really early on in your career, early on when you start doing this type of work. You have to start that mindset, and it has to be in place early on, because when you get requested for a rescue or you witness an incident and have to go into a rescue mode, you do not have time to get your mindset at that point. So you already have to adopt that mindset and have it ready to go to fall back on with your training and your experiences.
So you would say, Russ, that training is a big part of that mindset and in your ability to handle stressful situations under pressure like that is something that you learn?
Absolutely. The training is one of the most important aspects of it. In my experience and what I've seen working with and training multiple search and rescue personnel and working alongside them is you always fall back to the level of your training. And so you have really high aspirations and you have really high thoughts of yourself, but ultimately when the stress happens, when the situation changes, you fall back to your level of training and to the level of your experience. And so that's where having that and always training to a high level, setting a bar really high and training to that level and being competent instead of just current with your rescue and your training practices.
Russ, can you walk us through one of your last rescues that you've done that prepared you? Because all these are going to be different. Every scene you show up is never going to be the same. So can you kind of walk us through the last one you had to experience?
Well, we can talk about some complex rescue situations and what it takes coming into it. And the first thing you have to do is know what your capabilities are, know what your crew's capabilities are. And that can change day to day. It can change by someone having a bad day. Those capabilities are going to change. But when you get a request or you witness an incident that you're going to have to kick in and start doing rescues, you have to start looking at what are your options. And ultimately, your priority is you as a rescuer is your first priority. Additional victims are second priorities. And then your victim or your survivor will become your last priority. So you start looking at this and start deciding, is this something I can even do? Do we have the training? Do we have the equipment in order for me to properly effect this type of rescue? And that it has to come down to the whole crew. It's not going to be just the person that's hanging on the end of the rope. It's not going to be the person that's going to go in the water. It has to be the whole crew. Is everybody comfortable with this? And secondly, as a rescuer with a company or an agency, you have to look, is this something that our policy allows us to do and allows us to affect this rescue? If not, then we need to get specialty units in here. If it is beyond your capabilities, if it gets into a confined space, or any other type of rescue that is beyond your capabilities of you, of your equipment, and your team. And so once you start communicating as a team and decide, here's our options, here's our capabilities, can we do this, number one? If we can't do this, then let's accept that early on. One of the hardest things for a rescue to do is say no and swallow their pride long enough to say, I can't do this with what I have. And so we need to call additional resources. We need to get people with additional training or additional equipment in order to effect this rescue. And that doesn't mean you stop what you're doing. You take steps in place to start putting those building blocks in place for a successful rescue. So once you've determined all that and communicate as a crew, you start looking at, here's my primary option. What I'm going to do when this option doesn't work or the conditions change or anything like that. What's our backup plan? What's our tertiary plan? And get additional resources coming in. And once you decide you're going to do that, make sure you have the right equipment. One of the biggest things that you need to watch out for is making sure that your equipment is prepared ahead of time. Make sure that your equipment, your safety equipment, your rescue equipment, your vehicles and everything is in place, ready to go.
Not to cut you off, Russ, but a big part of this podcast is, I mean, obviously Kathy works a lot with tower climbers, and I worked over 10 years myself in the industry, and we have rescues consistently done by fire departments.
Yes.
And to me, that's an embarrassment to the industry. For one, when we're supposed to be trained, we're supposed to be the guys there, prepared and ready, have the equipment, and be able to perform these rescues, and they're not able to. And I think a lot of the problem or a lot of the issues that come with that are that it's at the back of everybody's mind. And we really want to put this rescue on the forefront of everybody's thoughts when they get to a site, you know, and you have a lot of experience that can relate to that as well. And like you were saying, communication.
Absolutely. And part of any rigging plan, part of your JSA, everything that you do, we talk about a rescue plan and a safety plan. Mm-hmm. And so one thing that's really important is don't just talk your plan, do your plan. And so have these things designated. The equipment is there primarily when you have there, but it happens to everybody else. It's not going to happen to me. I've been doing this for 15 years. That's the mindset that we have to get around, and we have to be prepared for those types of situations. Routinely, we go out on rescues that are experienced personnel. They're experienced base jumpers. They're experienced rock climbers. They're experienced canyoneering. They're experienced in tower industry or crane industry. And it just takes one mistake. And so taking that a little bit of extra time and preparing your gear. Hey, this is our plan. This is how we're going to rig. If you can affect your rigging to facilitate a rescue, always think about what's going to happen if I make a mistake or something happens. If I can facilitate, if I can go ahead and put myself on a lower and ready to go, that's going to make it a whole lot easier if someone has to come and rescue me.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And so go ahead.
Oh, sorry. And to your point, where so many of these construction guys that come in, and I'm like, what does your rescue bag consist of? And they're like, I don't know. I'm like, right. I'm almost speechless.
I always would take that personally, going out and working at a tower site where they didn't even have rescue equipment with us. And early on in my career, I would work on those sites, you know, and later on I would actually, you know, make a big deal about it, or I would walk off that site and leave that company if it came down to that, because that's the mentality across the tower industry.
It is. And that's why we're continuing to have serious injuries and fatalities. A lot of these towers are not located right downtown or 5 minutes from a fire station. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of fire departments and rescue departments that are not set up or equipped or trained to effect rescues off from towers. It's something that's foreign to them. They're starting to slowly come around to it. But when you're working on a tower in a remote location, your rescue may be an hour, 2 hours, 4 hours, 8 hours away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's dependent on your buddies.
Absolutely. And that's a long time to hang there. So that's one of the biggest things that I think we need to do as professionals, and trying to bring that rescue crossover into it. and encourage people. It's their life, it's their team's life, and ultimately it gets into their company, the company survivability, because after specific incidents, and too many of them, or violations or fines of any sort, companies become uninsurable.
Mm-hmm.
And so that creates some challenges too. Then you don't have a job anymore. And that rescuer mindset is tough. It's a very difficult thing to get into, because you have to admit that you're vulnerable, and that you have to admit that there may be a situation where you're going to have to be rescued.
Mm-hmm.
And
I'm sorry, Russ, let me ask you something. Have you ever been with your crew and then one of your guys have said, I can't do this. I'm struggling.
Absolutely. Every crew that I've worked with, and any professional crew, whether they're volunteer or paid, has a safety plan in place and has a safety program in place. And once someone calls an all stop on something, it doesn't mean that we're going to pack up and go home. It means that we address that specific issue at that time, and we can make it so that everybody's comfortable at that point in time to do that rescue. Maybe we change the way we have something anchored. Maybe we change type of equipment that we're using, or the carabiners. But it also comes back to that training. We require our tower climbers and everything to go out and climb towers occasionally and do stuff and be evaluated and everything. Why not incorporate a rescue scenario with that? Or take a little bit of time as a company, as owners that are responsible for these guys' safety, and take a couple hours and say, hey, we're going to run some rescue scenarios, and get that in place, to get that mindset up, to start creating that back of the mind thought process. How can I make sure that we're going to go home at the end of the day every day?
Yeah, because I think a lot of guys as well, they don't know how they're going to handle a situation until that first time, until they're put into that situation. And I think, obviously training frequently is going to help in actually making it as realistic as possible. I mean, I don't know. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. And being military myself, I always had that mindset that the more you bleed in training, the less you bleed in battle.
Yeah.
And so the more time and effort you put into the training aspect of it, and that mindset of, hey, what can we do to make this safe? And change your things a little bit, change your rigging a little bit, so that if someone has to come up and rescue me, how can I facilitate that? How can I make it better? Instead of waiting 3 or 4 or 5 hours for rescuers to get there. And a lot of the, like I said, a lot of the areas, the smaller fire departments, the smaller rescue agencies, they may not have the manpower and the personnel. A lot of them work with volunteers. And so there's a delay getting personnel there to do that. They'll get the job done, but there's that delay. And so the more we can set ourselves up for success and alleviate potential fatal errors, and when we do have an error, have a plan in place to solve that problem and to fix that problem and get everybody down off the tower or off the windmill or off from the crane in a safe manner, so that we can continue our jobs.
So with that, but with that mentally though, have you actually had, because some of these guys just, it's in their mindset that they're not capable, and that they actually freeze up. And I know you said that's along with training and everything, but when Tommy and I did that rescue out there in Janesville, right? Like I guess because you're right about the training, because I do it so much, so I had the confidence to rescue the patients. But when I attended that International Rescue Symposium in Albuquerque recently, the person was talking about the mindset of the rescuer and how they set up almost like, and we can't do it in the construction, it'll never happen, but they almost set up a base camp, and they changed it to set up like they get the hot chocolate, they set in the donuts and the Pop-Tarts or whatever. So this way it makes that person that's getting ready to go rescue more comfortable and at ease as what's to happen. Or when they get done with the rescue, they're at a better position mentally. And in a construction industry, that's never going to happen. So I feel like it's two different lifestyles we're talking about. Construction is all about time and money, And yeah, that's great. We want to practice rescue, but now we're paying for man hours. And what if something does happen? What if there's an injury while we're doing it? So we're in kind of in a situation where I don't know the answer right now for all of this.
Well, I think a big part of it is, as trainers, it's a lot of that responsibility falls on us to help get them in that mindset. And what we have to realize and look at is these guys generally work with small crews and they know the people they're working with. So there's that emotional response when they witness a friend or a coworker or a relative get injured. But we need to start setting that bar at some point and helping them realize. I firmly believe that agencies and companies will give you, and the military does this too, they'll give you enough training to do your job and to be okay at your job. You have to take that personal accountability and that personal responsibility and have that integrity to want to go to that next level and put a little bit of your, go ahead.
Not to cut you off, but I was going to say I wholeheartedly agree with it being the trainer's job to train the climbers, obviously, but I want to even put that even further on the climbers themselves, and that's where you were going when I interrupted you. So sorry about that.
Oh, it's okay. Yeah, we have to, instill in themselves that they're, and I think explaining some in reality, it's easy to put on your paper. We're going to call the local fire departments. We're going to call the local rescue squad. And that meets your requirements to document, hey, we have a plan in place. But if you take those extra couple minutes and say, where is the closest station? What's their capabilities? Do they even have rope capabilities? Are they a very small department that doesn't have everything in place, and they're going to have to call for another department that's an hour away? And so truly knowing what resources we're bringing in there and what resources we're coming in, that are bringing in. If you're going to be a long time on a job, invite them over. Invite the local resources over and talk to them. Take that extra 15 or 20 minutes. If you're the foreman or the job supervisor, take those few extra minutes. Majority of the rescuers that I know would be more than happy to come in and at least get an overview and show them what you're using, show them that equipment. It doesn't take much time. It doesn't take much money to do that, and at least get them familiar so that they know what you're doing, you know what they're doing, and what their capabilities are and how long you're going to have to be self-sufficient for that. But as trainers, we need to set a bar that is attainable, but also is above just minimum standards. We need to set people up for success, to set people up with that mindset to do this. And just showing videos helps, but coming in and showing them mindsets and showing some of the different sets, because it is tough to break that cycle of this is the way we've always done it. Been climbing for 20 years and I've never had an incident. This is the way we've done it. And so
that makes it even more dangerous sometimes, with complacency.
Absolutely.
For those experienced people.
And repetition. You do the same thing over and over and over again. You want to start taking shortcuts. And so from what I've seen in my experience, it's either you're brand new guys that are extremely dangerous or you're 10 plus year people that are extremely dangerous, because we start aging and stuff doesn't hold up as long. And we think that we know what we're doing. So fighting that mindset and giving people tools. And we can do that with training, with simple things to come in and give them tools to succeed and have that desire to succeed and explain the importance of why we're doing what we're doing.
Right on. Good stuff, Russ.
Well, thank you.
Tommy, did you have any more questions for Russ?
I guess the only other thing, we pretty much talked about everything I wanted to go over. I guess if there's one other thing, that we could get into your mind a little bit about would be in the extreme moment of pressure where everything's on you to succeed, or it's your life or someone else's life, and the balance, what keeps you calm in those moments, and what gives you success?
Truly for me, and I've in my career on multiple different occasions have had the opportunity to assist with complex rescues and long rescues, and spent the night on rescues and everything. For me, it comes down to finding that line between confidence and arrogance, but knowing what my skill levels are, knowing what I can do, and more importantly, knowing my equipment, trusting my equipment, and continually doing safety checks. I have had the ability to, again, fall back to my level of training. And for me, I always strive to be as good as I can with the classes. And so I'll go to classes. I try to read every piece of equipment that I can get, but get in that mindset and approach it as a problem that you have to solve. And when I instruct, I teach, it's a chess game. Where do I want to be in 5, 6, 7, 8 moves? And so what do I need to do to get there? And being able to separate that, rely on your confidence in your skills, rely on your team's skills, and know that I'm within my equipment, I'm within my safety comfort. And I've pushed it really hard on a couple of times where I'm on the very upper end as rescue teams and rescue crews of our comfort level. But we're still moving forward with that and still staying within our company's policies, our team's policies, our equipment capabilities, but more importantly, our personal capabilities and our personal limits. And again, maybe it's because I've been doing it for a long time, but from early on, when I first started doing this, again, knowing how important it is for your skills and your training and keeping up on that, practice at different times, train at different times of the day, in different weather, in different locations. Mm-hmm. We get a lot of teams that will go and train the exact same skill in the exact same place every time they train. And they're really good at conducting that evolution in that place. But if you get them outside of that and also empower your team members to become leaders and to move forward into that leadership role as far as how they're going to train our next generation, train them better than we were trained, to give them more skills and more abilities than we were provided, more knowledge than we were provided, so that they can continue to take this industry and take all these industries up to that next level.
Very good.
Yeah, there's two things I got from that express, which I find is very good for Tommy and I for our next one, is like, you're only as good as your team.
Yes.
Your own, and you can equate that to sports. You can equate that to anything in life. But when it comes to rescue and saving somebody's life, you're only as good as your team. And then, like you said, empower the next generation. And you mentioned that in the class this week, where you give them the information and give them the knowledge to continue to pass along to everybody.
And I think another really important factor is that there's going to be a role for everybody that's going to be there. They may not be the one that is doing the climbing or the one that is hanging on the rope to conduct the rescue, but we need competent people to rig. We need competent people to function as safety. And so just because someone isn't maybe as comfortable hanging on the rope, there's still a very important and valuable role for them in that. And so there's room for the new guys. There's room for people to come in and assist with these rescues, because there's a lot of work that has to be done.
I know you touched on it a little bit as far as communication goes, but communication between you and your crew, that everybody has a job and everybody knows their job, you know, when this plan is put in place.
Absolutely. Everybody needs to know the plan. Everybody needs to understand the plan, and everybody needs to speak the same language. Mm-hmm. and the same terminology. And that's where standardizing or briefing, you know, whether we're using whistles, whether we're using horns, whether we're using radios, but make sure that everybody is speaking that same language. But it's also extremely important to make sure everybody knows the plan. Everybody knows the backup plan. Everybody knows our third plan. Keep additional resources coming in. Don't cancel them until everybody is safe on the ground. Because until we get everybody back on the ground, there's still a potential for another issue and another problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, I agree. Tommy, I'm ready to say, you know, thank you to Russ. Do you have any final questions?
No, Russ, we really appreciate your time coming on here and imparting all of this great knowledge of all your years of experience. And,
Anytime. Like I said, I'm kind of getting to the point in my career where I think that's where I have the most value is helping train next
for
people.
sure.
Because those 3 o'clock in the morning calls hurt for a while.
Yeah. No, well, we appreciate it. And to everybody out there listening, make sure you subscribe. We're going to be doing some more podcasts coming up. So until then, everyone have a great day.
All right. Thank you,
Thank you.
Russ, very much.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Russ.
Bye.